What drives me most crazy when I watch how ordinary people handle money is not that they are not intelligent, it is that they often do the right things in the wrong order. They invest before they stabilize, they chase returns before they remove guaranteed losses, they buy stocks while credit card debt is compounding against them at rates that almost no asset class can reliably beat. They ask whether they should buy individual companies, crypto, or the next exciting ETF, while a financial hole sits beneath them, draining the system every month. That is like trying to fill a bucket while the bottom has large holes in it. You can pour more water in, you can work harder, you can feel busier, but if the structure is wrong, progress leaks out before it can compound. This is one of the most important principles in personal finance and investing. The sequence matters. In markets, order matters. In debt cycles, order matters. In building a portfolio, order matters. And in building a personal financial system, order matters more than most people realize. Most people think the investment question begins with what should I buy? I think that is the wrong first question. The first question is, what is the weakest part of my financial machine, and what should be repaired before I try to make the machine run faster? If you get that question right, you may save yourself tens of thousands of dollars over a lifetime. You may reduce stress. You may avoid forced selling. You may capture free money. You may pay less tax. And you may build wealth in a way that is not only mathematically better, but psychologically more stable. Most people ignore this because it is boring. It is more exciting to talk about the stock market. It is more exciting to talk about the next company that could double it. It is more exciting to imagine wealth appearing through one brilliant trade. But durable wealth rarely comes from excitement. It comes from good principles repeated in the right order. Think about building a house. You do not begin with expensive furniture, granite counters, or dramatic lighting if the foundation is cracked and the roof is leaking. You repair the structure first. You make sure the house can stand. Then you improve it. Your financial life works the same way. If you skip the foundation, every investment decision you make sits on unstable ground. The first foundation is liquidity. Before you invest a single dollar into risk assets, you need an emergency reserve. I know this does not sound impressive. It does not make people feel clever. It does not create a story you can brag about. But it is one of the most important stabilizers in the system. An emergency reserve is not only money for unexpected expenses, it is a decision-making tool. When a car breaks, a medical bill arrives, a job is lost, a family emergency appears, or a roof begins to leak. The person with no reserve is forced into bad options. They may put the expense on a credit card, they may take a loan, they may sell investments at a bad time, they may raid a retirement account and pay penalties, they may make emotional decisions because pressure has removed their flexibility. Liquidity prevents pressure from becoming panic. That is why the reserve matters. A lot of people think cash sitting in an emergency fund is lazy money. In a narrow investment sense, yes, cash may not earn much compared with long-term assets, but that is not the job of this cash. The job of emergency money is not to maximize return. Its job is to protect the rest of the system from being interrupted at the worst possible moment. Every asset has a job. Emergency cash has a job. It buys time. It prevents forced selling. It keeps a temporary problem from becoming a debt spiral. It gives the mind enough safety to make rational decisions. That psychological part is important. Recent research has shown that even a modest emergency reserve can significantly improve financial well-being. That makes sense. When people know they have a buffer, they do not feel that every surprise is a threat to their survival. Their nervous system becomes calmer. And calmer people make better decisions. I would not start by telling someone to save 6 months of expenses immediately if that feels impossible. The size of the reserve should fit the person's life. A stable government worker with benefits may need less than a freelancer in a volatile field. A single person with low expenses may need a different reserve from a family with children, medical needs, or variable income. The principle is to build the reserve in stages. First, get to a small starter amount as quickly as possible. $1,000 is not enough to protect a life, but it can cover many small emergencies and stop the first layer of panic. Then work toward 1 month of essential expenses, then work toward 3 months. If your income is unstable, your job is uncertain, or your obligations are high, continue toward a larger reserve. The specific number matters less than the principle. You are building a shock absorber before you drive fast. Without a shock absorber, even a small bump can damage the whole machine. Once that first liquidity foundation is in place, the next job is to eliminate high-interest debt. This is where many people make the largest mistake. They begin investing while carrying credit card debt at 20% or more. That is not sophisticated. It is structurally unsound. If you have debt costing you 22% per year, paying it off is like earning a guaranteed 22% return before tax, before fees, before volatility, and before market risk. Very few investments in the world can compete with that, and none can compete with it safely. Credit card debt is not normal debt. It is an aggressive compounding engine working against you. The credit card company owns the compounding, you own the stress. If you carry $5,000 of credit card debt at a very high rate and make only minimum payments, The interest can consume thousands of dollars over time. That is capital that could have been working for you. Instead, it works for someone else. This is why I consider high-interest debt to be financial cancer. It grows, spreads, and weakens the whole organism if you do not treat it. The method is simple. You list your debts, you write down the balances, interest rates, and minimum payments. You pay the minimums on everything so you stay current. Then every extra dollar goes toward the debt with the highest interest rate first. This is the mathematically optimal approach, often called the avalanche method. It attacks the most expensive debt first and saves the most interest over time. Some people prefer paying off the smallest balance first because it gives them motivation. That can work if psychology is the limiting factor, but from a pure system perspective, the highest rate debt is the most dangerous leak, so it should be sealed first. The point is not to feel clever. The point is to stop the guaranteed loss. Most people underestimate the value of avoiding losses because gains feel more exciting. But in wealth building, avoiding a guaranteed 20% loss can be far more powerful than chasing an uncertain 8% gain. That is a principle: remove guaranteed negative compounding before seeking uncertain positive compounding. There is, however, one major exception to paying off high-interest debt before investing. That exception is the employer retirement match. If your employer offers to match your contributions to a retirement account, that is usually the next priority, even while you are still attacking debt. This may seem contradictory, but it is not. The employer match is one of the few guaranteed high-return opportunities available to ordinary people. If your employer matches 50 cents for every dollar you contribute, that is an immediate 50% return on that portion of your money. If the match is dollar for dollar, it is a 100% return. You do not find that in normal markets. You do not get it from a stock. You do not get it from a bond. You do not get it from a savings account. It is free money attached to the structure of your compensation. When people ignore the match, they are effectively refusing part of their paycheck. They may not see it that way because the money never reaches their checking account. But economically, that is what is happening. The key is to contribute only enough to capture the full match while high-interest debt is still outstanding. Do not overfund the retirement plan at this stage. If expensive debt is still compounding against you, capture the free money, then return to the debt attack. There are details to understand, such as vesting schedules. Some employers require you to stay with the company for a period before the match fully belongs to you that matters. If you know you will leave soon, the calculation can change. But in most cases, the employer match is still too valuable to ignore. This is the proper balance: liquidity first. Capture free money, eliminate high-cost debt, then build the tax-advantaged investment machine. When these foundational pieces are in place, you can move into the tax optimization layer. This is where the sequence becomes very important because tax treatment can change the final outcome dramatically. A dollar that compounds without annual taxation is not the same as a dollar that is taxed repeatedly as it grows. Over decades, small tax differences can become enormous. The next place many people should look is an IRA. An individual retirement account often gives more control than an employer plan. Employer plans can be good, but many of them have limited investment menus, higher fees, and fewer choices. An IRA can allow access to low-cost index funds and ETFs, which may have far lower expense ratios than the funds inside some workplace plans. Fees matter because fees compound too. A 1% difference in fees may sound small in 1 year. Over 30 or 40 years, it can become a major transfer of wealth from you to the financial industry. This is one reason I like simple, low-cost structures. Complexity often benefits the seller more than the investor. An IRA can be traditional or Roth. This choice is really a question about taxes. Do you want the tax benefit now, or do you want the tax benefit later? With a traditional account, contributions may reduce taxable income today, but withdrawals in retirement are taxed as income. With a Roth account, you pay taxes now, but qualified withdrawals later are tax-free. The decision depends on your current tax rate, expected future tax rate, time horizon, income trajectory, and uncertainty about policy. Young workers early in their careers may prefer Roth because their tax rate may be lower today than it will be later. High earners in peak income years may prefer traditional because the current deduction is more valuable. But there is humility required here. Predicting future tax rates is difficult. Predicting your future income is difficult. Predicting government policy decades from now is difficult. When the future is uncertain, tax diversification can be valuable. That means having some money in traditional accounts and some in Roth accounts so you have flexibility later. Flexibility is valuable because the future is not a single path. Once you have captured the employer match and addressed high-interest debt, maxing an IRA can be a powerful next step because it combines tax advantage with investment control. Then comes one of the most overlooked financial tools in the entire system, the health savings account. The HSA is not available to everyone. You must be enrolled in an eligible high-deductible health plan that may or may not be appropriate depending on your health, family situation, and medical expenses. But for people who qualify and can use it well, the HSA can be extraordinarily powerful. It has a rare tax structure. You can receive a tax benefit on contributions. The money can grow tax-free. Withdrawals for qualified medical expenses can also be tax-free. That is very unusual. Most accounts give you 1 or 2 tax advantages. The HSA can give 3. This makes it one of the most efficient long-term accounts available, especially because medical expenses in retirement are highly likely. People may debate how much they will spend on travel, housing, or lifestyle, but almost everyone will have health expenses. A pool of money that can be used tax-free for those costs is very valuable. The most powerful HSA strategy for those who can afford it is to invest the HSA money and pay current medical expenses out of pocket while keeping receipts. The reason is that there is no time limit on reimbursing yourself for qualified medical expenses as long as you keep proper documentation under current rules. That means a medical expense today can potentially be reimbursed years later from an HSA that has been allowed to compound. This turns the HSA into a long-term tax advantaged medical reserve after age 65. The HSA becomes more flexible. Non-medical withdrawals are taxed like traditional retirement account withdrawals, but qualified medical withdrawals remain tax-free because retirement health costs can be substantial. An HSA can reduce one of the largest uncertainties in later life. Again, the principle is that the account should match the job. The HSA's job is not just current medical spending. Used well, it can be a long-term health care compounding account. Once the IRA and HSA opportunities are addressed, the next move is usually returning to the employer retirement plan and contributing beyond the match. At this stage, you have already captured the most obvious free return. You have eliminated the most destructive high-interest debt. You have likely used the more flexible IRA. You have used the HSA if eligible. Now the 401k or similar employer plan becomes the next major tax shelter contribution. Limits can be substantial for people who can save aggressively. Maxing a workplace retirement plan can shelter a large amount of income from current taxation or place a large amount into Roth-style retirement savings, depending on plan options. This matters because tax-advantaged compounding over decades is one of the great engines of wealth building. The average American saves too little to ever reach this point. That is the reality. Many people do not even capture the full employer match. Fewer max an IRA, fewer still max an HSA and a 401k. So if someone can follow the sequence this far, they are already operating at a higher level than most households, but that should not create arrogance. It should create gratitude and discipline. The goal is not to look sophisticated. The goal is to build a system that quietly compounds. When people finally reach the point where they have used the available tax-advantaged accounts, then taxable investment accounts become appropriate. This is the step many people want to start with. They want to buy individual stocks, they want to trade options, they want to speculate on crypto, they want to build a brokerage account and watch it move every day. There is nothing inherently wrong with a taxable account. It is extremely useful. It gives flexibility. There are no retirement account contribution limits. There are no ordinary early withdrawal restrictions like those that apply to many retirement accounts. It can help fund goals before retirement age. It can serve as a bridge for early retirement. It can be part of estate planning because taxable assets may receive a step up in basis under current law. But taxable accounts come with tax drag. Dividends can be taxed, interest can be taxed, realized capital gains can be taxed, turnover can create recurring tax costs. If you trade too often, the account becomes less efficient. A taxable account is powerful when used intelligently and expensive when used casually. The simplest approach for many people is to keep taxable investing tax efficient. That may mean broad, low turnover index funds or ETFs, careful attention to capital gains, asset location decisions, and a long time horizon. But again, this comes after the earlier steps for most people. Not before. The reason is sequence. A taxable account is flexible, but it does not give the same tax advantages as retirement accounts. If you invest in taxable accounts while leaving IRA, HSA, or 401k space unused, you may be paying unnecessary taxes for flexibility you do not need. Of course, there are exceptions. If you need money for a down payment in 5 years, retirement accounts may not be the right home for that money. If you plan to retire very early, taxable accounts can provide bridge funding. If your employer plan has terrible investment options or unusually high fees, the analysis may change. Personal finance always has context, but the general sequence exists for a reason. It reduces the biggest risks first, captures guaranteed returns, uses tax advantages, and only then moves into maximum flexibility. This is a rational system. The problem is that rational systems are usually less entertaining than speculation. People prefer to ask, what stock should I buy? Because that question feels like it could change everything quickly. But the less exciting questions often matter more. Do I have enough cash to avoid panic? Am I paying 20% interest to anyone? Am I getting the full employer match? Have I used my IRA? Am I eligible for an HSA? Am I using my 401k effectively? Am I paying unnecessary taxes in a taxable account? What is the role of each dollar? That last question is very important. Each dollar should have a job. Some dollars protect you from emergencies, some dollars eliminate expensive liabilities, some dollars capture employer matching, some dollars compound tax advantaged, some dollars prepare for health costs, some dollars fund early retirement or flexible goals, some dollars take risk for long-term growth. When every dollar has a job, the system becomes clearer. When dollars have no assigned job, emotion assigns them one in the moment. And emotion is usually a poor capital allocator. Now let us think about why getting the order wrong is so costly. Imagine someone with credit card debt at 22% who also invests in a taxable brokerage account. If the brokerage account earns 8% before taxes and the debt costs 22% after tax, the person may feel like an investor, but structurally they are losing. The investment gains are being overwhelmed by the debt cost. Or imagine someone who invests in a taxable account while ignoring an employer match. They may choose stocks that rise, but they gave up an immediate guaranteed return from the match that is an opportunity cost. Or imagine someone investing heavily in a taxable account while leaving Roth or traditional IRA space unused. Over decades, the tax drag may reduce the final result significantly. Or imagine someone with no emergency reserve who invests every dollar into the market. When an emergency comes during a market decline, they are forced to sell at a bad price. The problem was not the investment. The problem was the missing liquidity layer. These are not small details. They are system design issues. Most financial failure is not caused by one bad investment. It is caused by a poorly designed system that forces bad decisions under stress. That is why order matters. A good order reduces the probability of forced errors. The emergency fund prevents forced borrowing or forced selling. Debt payoff removes guaranteed negative compounding. Employer match captures free return. IRA and HSA maximize tax efficiency and flexibility. 401k contributions shelter more income. Taxable accounts provide flexible long-term wealth beyond the tax advantage system. Each step makes the next step stronger. This is how compounding is protected. Many people talk about compound interest as if it is only about rate of return, but compounding also requires continuity. If your system keeps being interrupted by emergencies, debt payments, taxes, panic sales, and bad timing, the compounding engine never runs long enough to matter. The sequence protects continuity, that is its hidden power. There is also a behavioral benefit when you follow an order. You do not have to reinvent the decision every month. You do not wake up asking whether to chase this stock or that fund. You know where the next dollar goes because the system tells you. This reduces emotional decision making and investing. Reducing bad decisions can be just as important as finding good ones. Now I want to make the order clear in a natural way without treating it like a rigid law. The first dollars go toward immediate stability. You build a starter emergency reserve so life cannot knock you into expensive debt with one surprise. Then, while paying required minimums on all debts, you capture the employer match if one is available because it is an unusually high guaranteed return. Then you aggressively eliminate high-interest debt because no rational long-term investment plan should leave 20% negative compounding running in the background. Then you build the emergency reserve to a more durable level, often around 3 to 6 months depending on your personal risk. Then you use an IRA because of flexibility, low-cost investment options, and tax advantages. Then you use the HSA if eligible because of its rare triple tax benefit and its usefulness against future medical costs. Then you return to the 401k or similar employer plan and increase contributions beyond the match until you are using as much tax advantage space as is appropriate and affordable. Then, if you still have money to invest, taxable accounts become the flexible accumulation layer. This sequence is not exciting, it is powerful. Excitement is overrated, power is underrated. A person who follows this order for decades may not have a dramatic story, they may not have a viral stock pick, they may not brag about a lucky trade, but they will have something far more valuable, a system that keeps converting income into durable wealth. That is what matters. Now, let us examine the tax part more deeply because it is one of the biggest gaps in ordinary investing behavior. Taxes are not just an annual inconvenience, they are part of the return equation. If two investors earn the same pre-tax return, but one pays unnecessary taxes every year and the other compounds inside tax advantaged accounts, their outcomes can diverge dramatically over time. Taxes reduce the amount left to compound. If you reduce taxes legally and intelligently, more capital remains in the system. More capital compounding over time produces a much larger result. This is why asset location matters. Certain assets belong better in certain accounts. High income assets, high turnover strategies, or taxable bond interest may be more efficient in tax-advantaged accounts. Broad equity index funds may be efficient in taxable accounts because of lower turnover and favorable long-term capital gains. Treatment: the details can become complex, and people with meaningful assets should get professional help. But the general principle is simple. Do not ignore taxes. A portfolio is not successful because it looks good before tax. It is successful because it works after tax, after inflation, after fees, and after behavior. That is the real return. The HSA illustrates this beautifully. People often think of health accounts as spending accounts. But if you are eligible and healthy enough to use one strategically, it can become a tax-efficient investment account for one of the most predictable future expenses. Healthcare. This is an example of matching structure to reality. The reality is that medical expenses are likely. The structure is an account that can fund them tax-free if used properly. That is a good match. A taxable account also has its place. It is not inferior in every way. It is simply different. Its strength is flexibility. If you want to retire before traditional retirement account access is easy, taxable assets can bridge the gap. If you want to buy a home, start a business, or fund a major goal before retirement, taxable money can be accessed without the same restrictions. If you hold appreciated assets until death, current law may allow a step up in basis for heirs, though laws can change. So the taxable account is valuable. It just should not be used prematurely by people who have not used the more efficient tools available to them. The order is not about saying one account is good and another is bad. It is about using each tool when its advantages matter most. That is systems thinking. Now, there is another point that many people miss. Your savings rate is more important than investment selection at the beginning. Someone saving 40% of income into a reasonable diversified portfolio will usually do far better than someone saving 5% while searching for perfect investments. The early stages of wealth building are driven more by contribution rate than by investment brilliance. This is why focusing too much on stock picking too early can be a distraction. You need capital before returns on capital can change your life. The sequence helps you free up capital by removing debt payments, capturing match, reducing tax leakage, and stabilizing your behavior. Then investment returns have something to work on without capital. Even great returns do not produce much. A 10% return on $1,000 is $100. A 7% return on $500,000 is $35,000. Sale matters. So early wealth building is about building the machine that creates investable surplus. Later wealth building is about optimizing the deployment of that surplus. Again, order matters. If you are early in the journey, do not be discouraged because you cannot max every account. Most people cannot start where you are. The sequence still works even if you move slowly. Save the first buffer, capture the match if possible. Attack high-interest debt, build the reserve. Use the IRA if you can. Use the HSA if eligible. Increase workplace retirement contributions. Then taxable investing. Every step completed strengthens the system. If you cannot do everything, do the next right thing in order. That is how progress is made. There is a dangerous idea that wealth building must be complicated. It does not. The most effective systems are often simple but emotionally difficult. They require patience, discipline, delayed gratification, and the willingness to be bored. Being bored is underrated in finance. A boring emergency fund prevents chaos. A boring debt payoff plan beats a risky stock pick. A boring index fund may beat most active strategies. A boring contribution schedule can build a fortune. A boring tax shelter can save enormous money. Most people do not fail because the path is hidden. They fail because the path is not entertaining enough. Markets exploit the human need for stimulation. A good financial plan reduces stimulation and increases control. That is why I like principles. Principles are what you return to when emotions are loud. When the market is rising fast, the principle says do not skip the sequence to chase performance. When the market is falling, the principle says your emergency reserve exists, so you do not have to sell in panic. When a friend tells you about a hot investment, the principle says high interest debt still comes first. When you receive a bonus, the principle says put the next dollar where the system says it belongs. When taxes become confusing, the principle says use the accounts that give you legal advantages before using less efficient structures. This is how you keep yourself from being moved around by every headline. Now let me address the common objections. Some people say they want to invest before paying off debt because the market could rise. That is possible, but the debt cost is guaranteed, while the market return is uncertain. If the debt rate is very high, the rational decision is usually clear. Some people say they do not need an emergency fund because they have credit cards. That is not an emergency fund. That is expensive debt waiting to happen. A credit card is a payment tool, not a safety net. Some people say they do not contribute to retirement accounts because they want flexibility. Flexibility matters, but so does tax efficiency. The solution may be a balance, not ignoring retirement accounts entirely. Some people say they will start later when they earn more. Later is expensive. Time is one of the few advantages ordinary investors have over institutions. If you waste it, you cannot easily buy it back. Some people say the system is unfair. In many ways it is, but fairness is not a plan. Understanding the rules and using the available tools is a plan. That is the point. You do not need the system to be perfect to make intelligent decisions within it. Now let us look at the deeper principle behind the whole sequence. Money has a hierarchy of use. The first use of money is survival. The second use is stability. The third use is eliminating fragility. The fourth use is capturing guaranteed advantage. The fifth use is tax-efficient compounding. The sixth use is flexible investing. The seventh use is optional speculation. Most people reverse this hierarchy. They begin with optional speculation. They chase excitement, they seek status, they buy risky assets while survival, stability, and fragility are unresolved. That is why they feel busy but do not progress. A good financial life is built from the bottom up. If the bottom is weak, the top does not matter. This also applies to households with higher incomes. High income does not automatically create wealth. A person earning a lot of money can still be fragile if they have no reserve. Large consumer debt, poor tax planning, no retirement structure, and a lifestyle that expands faster than income. Income is not wealth, income is the raw material. Wealth is what remains after the system converts income into assets. That conversion requires order. The most important behavioral shift is to stop asking, what can I afford, and start asking, what does the system need next? If the system needs liquidity, build liquidity. If the system needs debt reduction, reduce debt. If the system needs match capture, capture it. If the system needs tax shelter, use it. If the system needs long-term investment, invest. If the system already has all of those, then you can think about taxable accounts and more flexible strategies. This is the difference between reactive money management and principled money management. Reactive people spend or invest based on emotion. Principled people allocate based on sequence. Now, there is an important nuance about retirement accounts. You should understand the rules before committing. There are contribution limits, income limits, withdrawal rules, penalties, investment choices, required minimum distributions in some accounts, and employer plan details. These rules can change. That does not make the accounts bad. It means you must know the structure you are using. Good tools require understanding. A hammer is useful if you know what it does. It is dangerous if you swing it blindly. The same is true with an IRA, Roth IRA, HSA, 401k, taxable account, or any investment vehicle. Do not outsource your understanding completely. You can work with professionals, you can use advisors, but responsibility remains yours. The reason this matters is that financial institutions often profit from complexity. If you do not understand fees, account types, taxes, and product incentives, you may become the customer instead of the owner. You may pay unnecessary fees. You may buy expensive funds. You may trade too much. You may miss employer matching. You may leave tax advantages unused. The financial industry is full of people ready to sell you solutions before you have defined the problem. Define the problem first. That is why the order is so useful. It tells you what problem you are solving now. At the beginning, the problem is fragility. Then the problem is expensive debt. Then the problem is missing guaranteed return. Then the problem is tax efficiency. Then the problem is contribution capacity. Then the problem is flexibility and long-term taxable wealth. Each stage has its own answer that is elegant. Now I want to talk about market returns. Many people hear that the stock market has historically returned a certain amount and then they assume they should invest every available dollar immediately. But historical averages do not remove sequence risk. If you invest money you may need soon, the market can fall before you need it. If you invest while carrying high-interest debt, the debt may compound faster than the investment. If you invest without an emergency fund, life may force you to sell. A good expected return does not make every dollar appropriate for the market. Time horizon matters, risk capacity matters, liquidity needs matter, debt cost matters, tax location matters. The market is a tool, not a magic machine. Used properly, it compounds wealth. Used prematurely, it can expose a weak structure. The best investors respect both the power and the danger of markets. Now let us imagine two people. The first person is excited. They open a brokerage account, they buy individual stocks, some crypto, a few ETFs, and maybe options. They also have credit card debt, no emergency fund, and no retirement contributions. They feel like an investor, but their system is fragile. The second person is boring. They build a starter emergency fund, they capture the employer match, they attack high-interest debt, they use an IRA, they use an HSA if eligible, they increase retirement contributions. They automate low-cost diversified investments. Only after that do they build taxable flexibility. For a while, the first person may look more exciting. They may have a stock that doubles. They may talk more about markets. They may feel more advanced. But over time, the second person is more likely to build durable wealth because the system is stronger. Wealth is not built by appearing sophisticated. It is built by being structurally sound. That is the lesson. The sequence also gives you peace. When you know the next step, you reduce anxiety. You do not need to compare yourself constantly to other people. You do not need to chase every opportunity. You can simply ask, where am I in the order, and what is the next highest leverage move? If you have no emergency fund, the next move is not quantum stocks. If you have credit card debt, the next move is not a taxable brokerage account. If you are missing an employer match, the next move is not stock picking. If you have unused HSA eligibility and expect medical costs in the future, the next move may not be more taxable investing. Context gives clarity. Clarity reduces mistakes, and fewer mistakes can produce far more wealth than one brilliant prediction. Now, for people who are already advanced, the sequence still matters, but the details become more personal. They may consider backdoor Roth strategies, mega backdoor Roth options if available, tax loss harvesting, asset location, donor-advised funds, Roth conversions, estate planning, municipal bonds, direct indexing, and other tools. But those are refinements. They do not replace the foundation. You cannot optimize a broken system into strength. Optimization comes after structure. This is another mistake people make. They want advanced strategies before they have basic discipline. Advanced strategies can help a strong system. They cannot rescue a weak one. The strongest financial plans are usually built from simple principles, executed consistently, and optimized only where optimization adds real value. Consistency beats intensity. A person who saves and invests every month for decades does not need to be a genius. They need to avoid quitting. They need to avoid catastrophic debt. They need to avoid unnecessary taxes. They need to avoid high fees. They need to avoid emotional speculation. They need to allow time to do what time does. That is not easy, but it is simple. The sequence exists to make consistency easier. When the next dollar arrives, the system knows where it goes. When a raise comes, increase contributions. When debt is gone, redirect the old payment into investments. When an emergency fund is full, stop overbuilding cash and move to the next step. When the IRA is maxed, move to the HSA if eligible. When those are done, increase the 401k. When tax advantage space is used, build taxable wealth. This turns progress into a pipeline. Income enters. The system allocates, assets grow. Taxes are managed, risk is controlled, time compounds. That is how wealth is built. Let me also say something about risk. Many people think risk means the market going down. That is one kind of risk, but it is not the only kind. Debt risk is risk. Liquidity risk is risk. Tax risk is risk. Behavior risk is risk. Fee risk is risk. Inflation risk is risk. Career risk is risk. Sequence risk is risk. A good investment order manages many risks, not just market volatility. The emergency fund manages liquidity risk. Debt payoff manages guaranteed negative compounding. Employer match manages opportunity cost. Retirement accounts manage tax risk. HSA manages future health. Cost risk taxable accounts manage flexibility and early access risk. Diversified investments manage concentration risk. This is why the sequence is more powerful than it looks. It is not just a list. It is a risk management framework. Ray Dalio often talks about understanding cause and effect. In personal finance, the cause and effect chain is clear. No emergency fund leads to panic borrowing or forced selling. High interest debt leads to negative compounding. Ignoring employer match leads to lost compensation. Ignoring tax advantaged accounts leads to unnecessary tax drag. Investing without understanding account type leads to inefficiency. Chasing returns before building structure leads to fragility. The effects are predictable because the causes are structural. Change the causes and you change the outcome. That is how you should think, not emotionally. Mechanically, principles are simply cause and effect relationships written down so you can use them before pain teaches them to you. Here is the principle in its simplest form. Protect yourself first. Stop guaranteed losses. Second, capture guaranteed gains. Third, use tax advantages. Fourth, invest flexibly. Fifth, speculate only after the foundation is strong. If you do that, you are ahead of most people. Not because you are smarter, because you are ordered. Order is an edge. Most people have no order. They have impulses. They react to ads, headlines, friends, fear, and excitement. They put money wherever the emotional pressure is strongest. That is not a strategy. A strategy tells you what not to do. It tells you not to buy the exciting thing yet because the debt is too expensive. It tells you not to overfund cash forever because inflation is real. It tells you not to ignore free employer money. It tells you not to leave tax shelters unused. It tells you not to treat taxable accounts as the first stop simply because they are easy to open. That discipline compounds. Now, if you are listening to this and feel behind, do not use that feeling as an excuse to avoid action. Feeling behind is common. The solution is not shame. The solution is sequence. Start with the next step. If you have zero emergency savings, save the first amount. If you have high interest debt, list it clearly. If you do not know your employer match, find out. If you have never opened an IRA, learn the options. If you are eligible for an HSA, understand how it works. If you have a 401k, look at the fees and investment choices. If you already max everything, build taxable wealth with tax efficiency. Every person is somewhere in the sequence. Your job is not to be at the end today. Your job is to stop skipping steps. Skipping steps is what destroys people. They skip the emergency fund and call themselves investors. They skip debt payoff and call themselves optimizers. They skip employer match and chase stock tips. They skip tax shelters and complain about taxes. They skip process and hope for luck. Hope is not a plan. Sequence is a plan. Now let me bring the whole idea together. The optimal order of investing is not designed to make you feel excited. It is designed to make you financially resilient. It begins with emergency savings because life is unpredictable. It attacks high, Interest debt because guaranteed negative compounding must be stopped. It captures employer matching because free money is rare. It uses IRAs because control and tax advantage matter. It uses HSAs where available because healthcare costs are predictable and the tax treatment is unusually strong. It maxes workplace retirement plans because tax advantage compounding is powerful, and only then does it move to taxable accounts because flexibility is valuable after the foundation is strong. That is the sequence. It is not perfect for every person in every detail, but the logic is sound. Stability before growth, guaranteed returns before uncertain returns. Tax efficiency before taxable flexibility, structure before speculation. Most people want the final step first because it feels like investing. But real investing begins before the brokerage account. It begins when you design the system that allows investing to continue through emergencies, recessions, job loss, medical bills, market crashes, and emotional stress. That is what most people miss. The question is not whether you can buy assets. The question is whether you can hold and keep buying assets through the cycle. The sequence helps you do that. A financial system that can survive is a system that can compound, and a system that can compound for decades is far more powerful than a person chasing the next hot stock. So before you ask what investment to buy, ask where your next dollar belongs. If it belongs in the emergency fund, put it there. If it belongs against high interest debt, put it there. If it belongs in the employer match, put it there. If it belongs in an IRA, HSA, or 401k, put it there. If it belongs in taxable investments, put it there. The answer is not the same for every person, but the order gives you a map. And in a world full of noise, a map is valuable. Most people lose because they move without a map. Do not be most people, build the foundation, follow the order. Let boring decisions compound. That is how you stop feeding coins into the slot machine and start building a machine of your own.